How many companies should you have? This is a big question. Now we have associated companies again. Hi, I'm Kimberly Shapcott, qualified chartered accountant, property investor and entrepreneur. Let's sit down and have a chat. How many companies should you have? Well, this is a big question and there's many different answers depending on who you speak to, what you're doing and how everything is fitting together for you. Now historically, this was not a big issue. You could have 5, 10, 20 companies if you want and there was no problem with having that many. However, something has changed and the reason it's changed is because we've now got marginal tax rates again, which means up to the first 50,000 is 19%. Between 50,000 and 250,000 we now have our marginal rate, and over 250,000 we've got 25% as our tax rate, which means now we're back to marginal tax relief. And something called associated companies kicks back in. We've managed to avoid associated companies for a decade while the tax rate has been consistent at the nice 19% that many businesses will be well aware of. However, now we've got this change to take things to 25%, the question of how many companies do you have becomes a real big question for many business owners who may have set up many companies. But the question now is, do you need them all? Check out on the channel the detailed associated companies video, which will go into a lot more detail on what is involved with an associated company. So what is the starting point for an associated company? Well, the starting point is, do you own all the shares in all the different companies that you have? So for example, I've got one company over here that is doing buy-to-lets, I've got another one over here that's doing my flips, I've maybe got another company, I don't know, doing some sourcing. And you've got kind of a couple of companies that may be just sitting there not doing an awful lot. Well, if you are 100% shareholder of all of those companies, then you've got associated companies. If you have a few people that you may be doing a JV with, then there's a question mark on whether or not they are an associated company. So there's a few question marks already starting to crop up on what is and what isn't going to be associated. Now, one thing we can say for certain is if you've got a dormant company that isn't doing anything, then that doesn't count towards the number of associated companies. So if you set up a company with a project in mind that might be going ahead but maybe doesn't, or it's delayed, that company at this point does not count towards your associated companies numbers. So that's a real positive from my point of view. And also if you have a non-trading pass-through holding company, again, that one does not count as well. There is a few more rules on that, but we can cover that in more depth in a different video. The general premise today is to have a look at how many companies you should be having. But what is the impact of having associated companies? So let's say that I have got 4 associated companies. I can do the maths in my head on that one. Now, what happens with an associated company is I've got 4 companies that are associated, and now I'm doing my corporation tax. Now, normally every company will have 50,000 for its corporation tax bracket of 19%, and will all have from 250,000 up to 25%. So what happens with associated companies is that 50,000 all of a sudden gets divided by 4. So now rather than waiting till I hit 50,000, I've only actually got 12,500 at the 19% tax rate. Which means if my company's trading and I'm making 50,000 every year, I'm all of a sudden going to be paying more tax. Now that 250 limit is now divided by 4 as well, 62,500. So if I'm making 50,000 in my company and I've got the 4 associates, I'm now in that marginal rate bracket, which potentially could be 26.5%. So before I was paying 19% for the first 50,000, and because I've got these associated companies, I'm now already up at the 26.5% tax rate. So my tax bill's just gone from whatever amount to a much higher amount, without anything happening. So what can you do about it? Well, the key question here is, what companies do you actually need? Now, if you've got a dormant company that's not doing anything, you don't really need to worry about it. But if you've got one company that's making 1,000, 2,000, one company making 100,000, one company making 10,000, you've got all these different amounts. The question is, do you need all of them separated? Is there a reason? Is there a risk factor that needs that one separating out from others? Or is there any way to amalgamate some of those companies together to minimise the impact of the associated company rules? One question you need to ask is, are all the costs going to the relevant company? I'm aware that some companies, they put all their costs in one company and they don't worry in their other companies. Whereas now we really do need to be making sure that the relevant costs are in the relevant companies. So those that are making the highest income, is that where the costs should be incurred? Or is there another company, to make sure that we're ensuring all our tax bills are managed in the right sort of way? There are still reasons why you may want to separate different things out. And this may be from risk factors, or this may be because you're doing things with different people. However, you really need to be managing this process now and see what is going to be happening with everything for your business, to make sure you're minimising your tax liabilities and not creating additional ones merely by the fact of having an additional company which maybe you aren't actually using or needing to its full potential. Therefore, anyone with more than one company, I would definitely suggest you talk to your accountant, you talk to your tax advisor and have an assessment to check whether or not you have got the right number of companies. And if you have got more than you need, how you can look at putting things together to amalgamate things to minimise what impact these changes in the tax rules are going to be having on you. Hopefully today you've discovered what an associated company is and what the implications are if you are treated as an associated company for corporation tax purposes. If you have any questions, then please do leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel and please do like the video. And let's make tax less taxing. Let's make tax less taxing.